everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to dip dye to create some fade sets on full skeins of yarn. Now, in the past, I have taken some mini skeins and sort of looped them together like so to create a chain. And then I dip dyed this chain to create a fade set, and it had really beautiful results. The problem with full skeins is that since we have 100 grams in a loop that is pretty much the same size as what we have over there, by the time we just double it once, it's really, really thick. And so we could insert another full skein through to create a similar kind of chain, but in doing so, I think it would be hard for the dye to penetrate as far into each of them because it is so thick. So this is still something that I probably need to try at some point in the future, but for today, I have a little bit of a different idea. Today, we're gonna create some really long skeins using zip ties to connect our minis together. So on the minis, we're gonna do, that's 2, then we're gonna have a 3rd, and we will continue until we have 100 grams of yarn. This is Sheila's Titanium from Wool to Dye For. It is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. And so now we just have a really long continuous skein because all of these minis are connected together. And so dip dyeing this is gonna be a lot more like when we dip dyed a 6-meter skein that we had commercially available. It's just instead of having like a repeating self-striping almost effect, we're gonna have a mini skein set that'll give more of a gradient that will slowly transition throughout it. And this effect of connecting the mini skeins is something we can do on the full skeins as well. I'm just gonna keep it a little bit looser. And we're gonna connect 3 together. Even though I am sending our lab partner today a set of 2 skeins, I thought it would be worth trying this with 3 so that way we can see what kind of color effects we get. And speaking of our lab partner, I would like to give a huge shout out and thank you to Lindsay, my lab partner for today. Thank you so much for encouraging me to think outside the box. I'm really excited to dye up this yarn for you, and I hope you will love how it's going to turn out. But now we have a very long connected 300 gram skein of yarn. And so then as we dip dye this, the first skein at the bottom should get the most color. And things should get progressively lighter as we go up, which could involve some really fun, subtle transitions, because conceivably, the lightest color on the first skein could be very similar to the deepest color on the second, which would be a fun, variegated transition for yarn. Oh my goodness, so this is taller than me and maybe a little bit heavy to dip dye, but we'll see, we're gonna try. I think with the help of a step stool, I should be able to slowly dip it into the pot, or maybe not so slowly, but we'll find out. The connected set of mini skeins is a lot longer. It's about twice as tall as me. I'm 5'6". And so, yeah, it's also a lot to dip in and out. But when I'm dipping, I will hold like a lot of this section of yarn in one hand and then slowly dip one end in, raising and lowering, but adding more and more yarn as I go. A long time I did some videos where I had some dye in a pot and I added mini skeins like one at a time every 30 seconds or so to create a fade set. And I think I've done this with untwisted minis and with twisted minis, and the results were very, very fun and pretty. This is just a different way to go about it and a new twist for me. So Lindsay, I'm very excited to see how this goes. I'm pre-soaking all of the yarn in some plain tap water for at least 30 minutes. And I don't think I said before, but the full skeins of yarn I'm dyeing today are Knit Picks Swish DK, which is 100% superwash merino. If you would like to learn more about any of the yarn and tools equipment that I use in my videos, I will have links and affiliate links that are clearly marked down in the video description. Whenever I'm doing a lab partner video, I always ask for any colors I should avoid, and Lindsay gave me a very interesting challenge. I was challenged to use a color that I've used the least of. And well, I have 4 new to me Derma Acid dye colors in chocolate brown, persimmon, soft tan, and vanilla cream. Now, these 2 colors are going to be very pastel, and so I don't think we'll use them. But the chocolate brown and persimmon, depending on what the colors actually look like, could work extremely well together. It's possible that I will love the results from just one color and then we'll consider it done from there. Or we may want to dip into a second color as well. So I think today we are going to start with the chocolate brown, and then depending on how I feel, if I feel like I want more pigment or more hues in there, we may or may not add the persimmon as well. But honestly, I think it's been a while since brown has had a full moment here on the channel, and so that's why we're starting with brown. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to start measuring out and dissolving some of this chocolate brown acid dye. As I mentioned, I've never used this color before, so I have no idea if it breaks or how easily or quickly it might absorb onto the yarn, and so we're gonna figure that out right here today. I measured out dye into 2 different cups. In one, I weighed out 1 gram of dye, and the other, I weighed out 3, so that way we would have the dye already ready to go for each of the 2 dip dyeing projects we will be doing today. Then I dissolved the dye in some hot tap water, not worrying too much about the volume because I plan to use 100% of the dye in each of the respective projects. Of course, I can edit that as needed, it's just the volume is not specific. Yes, we had a little bit of a spill at the end, and it seems like there was some powder on the bottom of the container that got on the countertop, which is weird because I've never opened this container. Derma acid dyes used to come with sort of like a seal around the rim that prevent any dye from like shaking out or something during shipping, so I don't know why the outside of this container was a little bit messier, but anyway, if my shower curtain that I use to protect my work surface is a little bit stained, usually a Lysol wipe or something will help get the rest of that dye off when I'm done with my day of dyeing yarn. In my 12-quart dye pot, I have 16 cups of water and 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. This is in like a medium level. A lot of times with dip dyeing, I might start with just 1 tablespoon per 8 cups of water, but I decided that we'll do a little bit more. The dye dissolved really, really nicely. I just started heating things up, which is why I can put the plastic cup in there without it melting. And so I've just added our 1 gram of dye because we're going to start with the mini skeins. But first, I would like things to heat up. We are nice and hot, so let's start dip dyeing. I have the final zip tie in between my fingers, and I'm gonna climb up onto a step stool so that way I can do this. And let's just start. So, ooh, it's a nice reddish brown. Right now there's almost like a purplish note here. I think it's not like my muck custom dye quite, but there's definitely something reddish. So I have no idea how fast or slow I should be dipping in. It's possible I'm going entirely too fast. Maybe I should have set a timer so that way I could have kept track, but I've only added not even 2/5 of it yet. But yeah, as I dip now, things are getting lighter. Oh dear, I just splashed a little bit. So what we're gonna do, wipe that up. There was basically no color on that paper towel, but I've gotta be careful, extra careful, because these zip ties can lift and fling water in a way. Oh, funny, there is going to be a demarcation line potentially. The zip ties can fling water in a way that the yarn just wouldn't. You see as I like bring that up. So I think when we're going to change colors, we've got to commit. We've got to commit. But so I still have 1.5 whole ones left. I'm thinking now when we go in to do our next set, when we're doing the full skeins, when I add the yarn in, I'm gonna need to like wiggle it in there more. And in fact, I do have tongs nearby. With these 20 gram mini skeins, wiggling it is not as important because as I add the yarn in, like a lot of it can access the dye. So it's just worth keeping that in mind. But it's definitely looking pinker. We might not need another color. If this goes from like a deeper brown to a more purple color, I would say it's not as red as chestnut. Chestnut leans very, very red. But this is a little bit more rose. It's like a purplier red. Maybe? I don't know. We will see for sure. But yeah, there's still a fair amount of color here, so this end probably won't be that pastel. But I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest. How long have I been dipping? Only about 3 minutes. I may add more acid for our next round, and this could end up being pretty subtle as far as the set goes. But I don't really mind. I do see differences in the depth of shade over there, so I am happy. I'm gonna reduce the heat to low. Ooh, the stuff that went in first is very dark. Oh, great. Great. I'm really excited. All right, I think at this stage, what I'm also, I was about to come and add more acid, but we're gonna use the same dye bath for the next color. But you know what? Let's just add 1 more tablespoon of white vinegar. So now we have 4 tablespoons and 16 cups of water. And then we will adjust from there as needed. But anyway, I'll set a timer for 30 minutes and we'll come back. It has been 30 minutes and there is pretty much no color in the yarn. Sometimes checking with a metal spoon can help see if there's any color. Oof, that edge is a beautiful pink. I don't know for sure whether or not we have breaking here. I mean, this color is so pretty. I'm not gonna add the orange. I absolutely love this. I think the muck color, when I mixed all 40 jacquard acid dyes, there was more of a purple. I did check it against all of my browns, and I don't think this one quite compares. It's very, very pink. Just I don't think it's pink as chestnut, which jacquard chestnut, which sometimes I feel like is much more of a red. I'm just wiping the edge. There's a little bit of some dye there, but not too bad. And so we're gonna go ahead and use the same dye bath to dye our full skeins that are connected. But I'm gonna start by adding just 8 more cups. We're gonna do 8 more. So that way we have 32 cups of water in here to better hold the 300 grams of yarn and let things move. And with this second batch of 8 cups, we added another 4 tablespoons of white vinegar, so I think we have a total of 8 tablespoons in about 32 cups of water. But the nice thing about adding more water to our pot is that our dye bath is no longer hot, it is just warm. And so we can add the approximately 3 grams of dye that we have. I say that with a little bit of a smile and an asterisk because I did spill a tiny bit, but I think that we did keep most of it here. Just trying to make sure that those last bits are well dissolved. And now I'm gonna heat things back up so we can start dip dyeing our yarn. We are getting nice and hot, making sure my tongs are within reach. This is gonna be a lot harder because there's 300 grams and it's gonna get a little bit heavy, but I will do my best, which is honestly is the most that I can ever do. So let's get started. I need to remember that there's only 3 skeins. Oh, that's so red. 3 skeins of yarn this time instead of 5. I'm not feeling the needs for the tongs yet because as I'm adding the yarn, you can see that it's spreading out a bit. And so that means that, like, I think that we're going to get good color on the inside of the skein. I'm going pretty fast with this first one. I think I'll want to slow down as we go into the second. But as I was walking over, I remember thinking, oh, it's a little bit ironic that, oh, this one looks like I would describe the color as being a chestnut brown. But then I realized that the color chestnut is a jacquard acid dye, not a Dharma acid dye. Oh, this is where I need to be careful because of those zip ties. I think that a way to do this going forward, if this is a technique, oh, that's so red. It is so pretty, but you see how that water is draining off that zip tie? I think that the best way to do this moving forward would be to cut the tail of the zip tie a bit, or even maybe use some string. But I was taking a close look at the first one and I didn't really see any resist marks from the zip tie. I regularly, when I'm dip dye from a zip tie already. And so yeah, I think that it's just interesting. So here, as the yarn is going in like little by little, the pot is getting a little more crowded. So I may need my tongs, but maybe not. I mean, this color is so pretty. So is this breaking, or is this just the way that a color looks at different depths of shade? That I don't know. The way we would be able to, oh dear, careful, careful, Rebecca. The way we would be able to investigate this further to understand if we're seeing colors break or if what we're seeing is just what this chocolate brown looks like when it's a little bit more dilute would be to look at different depths of shade of this color and to dye some yarn at, say, a 0.5, a 1%, and look at a lot of different depths of shade. Now, I believe the darkest color that we have here, as I go in with our last bit, I think our darkest color is going to be way deeper than a 1% depth of shade. And let me talk a little bit more about that. As I set a timer, do I also want to add more acid? Yeah, I've got maybe about a tablespoon in this cup. We'll just add that. You can always add more, but I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes and we'll chat. Color breaking is a phenomenon where you have a mixture of pigments. There's a lot of different colored pigments in a cup. And then as a mixture, you see one color. But when you're dyeing yarn, because they might bind to yarn at different rates, you see those colors separate. And so an easy example of this is when we have a purple and we see it split into pinks and blues, and you can see all those colors sort of separately on the yarn. But it's possible that this brown that we're dyeing with has a reddish undertone. And so when it's more concentrated, we see that brown color. And then when it's lighter, we get more of a pink. And this is a reason why I think that there are a lot of pre-mixed tan, ivory, vanilla, those kinds of very soft colors, because a tiny bit of a very deep brown or something or gray may not be as light and pale as what you want at light depth of shade. Now, it doesn't matter if this is color breaking or if it's just the difference in depths of shade. No, but it's fun. And I personally love to take advantage of colors that break. It's fun when you have one pre-mixed color and then you get a lot of different colors out of it. It feels magical and exciting. It's only a bad thing when the colors separate and you see those different hues when you were going for something that was all one tone. And so that's a reason why it's worth playing around with different colors, so then you start to learn and explore how different mixtures behave. A lot of times I will mention how I have a ton of pre-mixed colors, but if you're starting your acid dyeing journey, you probably only need a couple colors. Typically I say you want a red, blue, yellow, cyan, magenta, a black, and then after that I would probably say a good brown and a navy, just because a brown might be a little bit harder to mix. But one other reason why you might want some more pre-mixed colors is that some of these dyes that are primaries, some strike fast, some strike slow, and so then when you combine them, you might see more breaking when you're mixing your purple or your green, and maybe you don't want that breaking. And so that's a reason why sometimes going for a pre-mixed color, it might be a little more stable, but overall a lot of greens and purples and browns are much more likely to break because they tend to have a bigger mix of different pigments than when you look at different blues and reds. Even if they're a mixture, it's usually like a bigger proportion of one pigment and a tiny proportion of another. At least that's what I think. But anyway, let's go check back in on the yarn. I am so curious. Ooh, we've got some like cool, you know, there are brown, that's so pink. Oh, this is gonna be so cool. Oh man, I am so excited. I am so excited. I suppose you could do this without connecting the minis together, and you could dip one skein and then just immediately start dipping the next and the next and the next. It's just, this does allow a little bit of blending around that interface, but oh, I am so happy. All right, I'm gonna turn off the heat. I think most of the color has absorbed. There is a little bit of some brown staining around the edge. The water's looking pretty clear to me, but it won't hurt for the yarn to cool off inside the pot. And in fact, I'm gonna just move that lightest bit back into the middle. You know, won't hurt. And yeah, once it's all cool, then we can wash all of the yarn. We'll lay out all of the minis next to each other once it is dry. I don't want to do it in case there's any dye on the counter I haven't cleaned up yet. But at each of the interfaces where we have the zip tie, I'm not seeing the kind of resist I would have if I had linked the yarn together and the yarn was dipping on yarn. And I think that's because as I dip in, there's movement around that zip tie. Let me pick an interface that is not as dark. I'm also trying really hard to not tangle anything. But here you can see that there's way for the yarn to move on here, and so I'm not seeing a resist point from it, which is awesome. So it really, really is just like I had them not connected, and just as soon as I finished adding one into the pot, I started dip dyeing the next one. So again, I think we may need to try this again sometime in the future, maybe without them being connected, but having it all connected was a lot of fun. As we go to wash the yarn, I think I'm gonna disconnect them. I think it'll make it significantly easier to wash, and it will reduce the chance that things get tangled. And we've got enough zip ties. Granted, we will have one zip tie per mini, which is a lot, but you know, once we are done, we will be able to figure out and lay them out in the correct order. I'm not worried about that at all, just because of the way that the color progressions go. I think it's going to be a little obvious. But yeah, we are getting significantly darker and darker as we move down. Now we're just going to have to hope that we don't see any color bleeding, because when you're doing a new color, you never know. But the range of colors that we have in here, this is so, so pretty. This is like a really good mix of the colors striking fast, but not too fast. Sometimes when you're dip dyeing or even kettle dyeing with warm dye, things can strike so quickly that it makes it hard to add it in fast enough, and you can add something that feels very unbalanced. I could have gone slower and we could have ended up with less color, even less color in our lighter skein, but I don't think that it was a huge issue. So I am seeing a little bit of some brown bleeding here. I had just added some clear dish soap, and so we'll see how this is doing. I'm not sure if there are any primary brown pigments. I'm not super familiar with all the different colored pigments that exist out there. But looking in the pot that is still cooling, it looks like that there could have been some brown particulates that didn't dissolve, maybe related to the things on the side. But this is looking pretty good. It's also a good time to remind you that just because the water might be clear from a rinse, that doesn't mean that it won't bleed later on. Sometimes there could be nothing coming out at the rinse, and then when you go to wash it, there could be some bleeding. And so a lot of the things that I do with the rinsing, and when I talk about troubleshooting in any of these videos, those are things you can do if a garment starts bleeding itself. But anyway, I am going to put this through my spin dryer, and oh, funny. Oh, I was gonna be like, you know where we have some resist? It looks like there's some resist in the ties, but that's because some of that might have been like, never mind. But anyway, I am gonna go put this yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we're gonna wash our other yarn. Here in our full skeins, I see more evidence of breaking. I see some more brown notes that are less pink, and then some more pink notes. I am gonna do the same thing that I did on the mini skeins. You can see that this is still warm a bit. I am going to remove some of these zip ties the best I can. I will need to do some detangling once we are done, but I'm gonna do my very, very best. And that's because it seems like some of the yarn maybe got caught on some of these ties. Why does it always seem like the top one is by that end? But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit tangled, but I don't think that'll be a problem to undo. But oh my goodness, this is so fun. I think I could have gone in faster on this one. Oof. But I don't know which ones are my favorite for a set of two. Maybe not the deepest. I love all the variation and breaking that we have on that skein. But anyway, I'm gonna let this finish cooling off and then we can wash it. Let's wash the full skeins of yarn. And we're gonna add some dish soap, even though it's already a little bubbly, which I don't know if that was from, because this is some of the pre-soak water, or if there was just a little bit more soap left here in this bucket from the last yarn. But I'd say this time I'm not seeing any color come out, which is wonderful. Wonderful. The bases are slightly different. And I guess technically this one was in the heat a little bit longer. Ooh, right now it's kind of reminding me of an Afghan my grandma knit from, well, not for me, but she knit in the 70s and is now in my possession. I wasn't alive then. Let's see. It's looking good to me. All right, I'm gonna finish rinsing out this soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and hang it all up to dry. Here is the mini skein set where we have the darkest colors mostly on one end and then mostly the lightest colors towards the top. But if I flip things so that way we have like the lightest near the lightest a little bit more. This is all approximate, but you can get a little bit of sense about how these will blend together pretty well because they have the same color, a little of the same color, a little of the same color, all the way up. The full skeins have a tiny bit more variation to them. And right now I have them set up so kind of to show how the colors transition to one another. But if I flip this over, then you can see them all in the darkest to sort of lightest range. And they're just different ways that can maybe help you start to visualize how these may all work together if you're using them in some kind of fade set. I mentioned earlier in the video that although I was doing a 3 skein set here just because I thought that would be fun to play with, I'm giving my lab partner Lindsay 2 of the skeins. And I think that the 2 that kind of excite me the most as a 2 skein fade would be the lighter 2 because of the way that the colors have a lot more similar tones but then really shift, and so you'll see like a fun transition when they're blended together and you start to get more of that dark color in there. So Lindsay, I think these are your skeins. As far as comparing the 2 different sets together, the main difference that I see is that I feel a little bit more tan notes on the full skeins. I think that some of the pigments maybe struck a little faster because we had a little bit more acid, and therefore we see some tones that are a little more brown, a little bit less pink, especially in the lighter 2 skeins. But looking at the lightest ones side by side, you do feel some of those tan undertones in the mini skeins as well. It's just a little bit more obvious here. Now, I'm still pretty amazed how pink this color feels overall. In fact, if I didn't know I started with a brown, I am not sure if I would call this a brown set. But please let me know in the comments what kind of color you're seeing here and if this feels chocolate brown anywhere to you. To be fair, we were dip dyeing versus doing a kettle dyeing where we had some of that color all over. And so that could have shifted the proportion of different pigments, which could be why things overall look pink. Lindsay, thank you so much for being my lab partner in today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. If you at home would like to learn how you can become a lab partner like Lindsay, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. There's 2 different ways to sign up. One in the last minute listing where I've already started filming the video and dyeing the yarn, and the other where I'll start filming and dyeing the yarn after you sign up. If you have any questions about the lab partner listings or anything else I have on Etsy, feel free to message me there. Otherwise, leave comments below because I do read and try to reply to as many questions as I can. So Lindsay, thank you again for being my lab partner today. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I had a lot of fun today. I think I learned a lot, especially consider being careful when you're dip dyeing. The zip ties may splash a little bit, but I did really enjoy the effect. I think that you could do something like this without the zip ties, especially if you had sort of like your second skein on deck. So you started to dip that in almost at the same time when you were adding the last one in. You could get a similar overlap kind of feel. But I know I'm definitely going to be playing with this more in the future, and I don't know, maybe next time we will add a second color to dip from the other side as well. But this color I thought was gorgeous enough and didn't need it. Thank you so much for watching.